Hey guys, welcome to solo ReacTalk. Today I'm going to be reacting to Hitler's beer hall disaster between two wars, 1923 part 1 of 1 by Time Ghost History. If you want to check out my previous reactions to other Time Ghost History videos, remember the playlist card will be at the top. Just click on it and be able to access them. Okay, let's start. 3, 2, 1, go.
Since 1919, Germany's new Weimar Republic has seen not one, but
Is that beer? Wow, okay, that's a lot of beer, man.
two attempted coups d'etat. Both of them had failed spectacularly. But in 1923, when the Versailles Treaty really begins to hit the fragile democracy hard, Adolf Hitler and one of the previous troublemakers, former Quartermaster General Erich Ludendorff, try a third. Welcome to Between Two Wars, a summary of the interwar years, from the uncertainty and hedonism of the 1920s to humanity's descent into the darkness of the Second World War. I'm Indy Nidell. Now, by 1923, the successor state to the German Empire had seen its fair share of instability. This was aggravated by the Versailles Treaty, which put blame for the war squarely on Germany and demanded huge financial war reparations. To make things worse, Germany had financed the war with loans that are now due. Problem is that Germany doesn't have the money to pay. What wasn't spent on the war is being spent to fight back incessant revolutionary activity. But the German government has developed a quick solution. Simply print more money. While this might lead to a little bit of inflation, it creates much needed cash. The German Reich...
I mean, look how much money that is. Just bundles of money everywhere. This kind of reminds me of what happened to Zimbabwe, where they were also printing out money like there was no tomorrow, and the inflation just rose so high it became hyperinflation, and they started having almost like 1 billion Zim dollar, you know. So probably this is also like a 1 billion German. What did they use? Franc? I can't remember the currency of the Germans, but I think it's franc if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it's something else. Yeah, but definitely this is just, it's weird. It's just so weird seeing all that money, and all that money is virtually useless, you know.
quickly pays off her creditors, and the economy at first seems to recuperate faster than in other warring nations like France or Britain, which support a policy of deflation. At first. Inflation is harsh, and the German mark drops from 16 marks to $1 in 1918 to 430 marks to the dollar by the first half of 1922. So there's a problem with the system. The new money that's being printed doesn't have any real value behind it, and this is about to create a catastrophe. You see, the trick that Germany is now playing had been anticipated in the treaty, so reparations have to be paid in hard currency like dollars or pounds. And how do they buy that currency? Well, they print more money. By early 1922, the situation is about to explode. The only way to stop the mark going into free fall would be to delay or decrease reparations. But France and Britain remain steadfast. They want their money, and they want it now. Rapid inflation now accelerates into hyperinflation, and by the end of the year, you need 7,400 marks to buy a single dollar. The mark is losing value so fast, it's impossible to print money fast enough. They even resort to just stamping new value on old bills. By November, Germany is completely incapable of paying any reparations whatsoever.
No, guys, imagine, bruh, just imagine. Yo, they have to now stamp on that same money to say that it has increased the amount, you know, from 1 to 10. From 10 to 100. Just stamping on that paper money. Oh, gosh.
While the British now indicate they might be willing to agree to at least a temporary moratorium on payments, French Prime Minister Raymond Poincaré will not have any of it, so he decides to go get his reparations himself. January 11th, 1923, he orders French troops to occupy the heavily industrialized Ruhr district. The Belgians quickly join them. They're going to seize Germany's industrial goods and natural resources, particularly the Ruhr's coal. The current German Chancellor, Wilhelm Kuno, encourages the German population to passive resistance. The idea is to to refuse to sell goods to French soldiers, harass them, hold rallies and demonstrations. The French try to repress the passive resistance with violence. 150,000 German activists are arrested and 140 German civilians are killed. While Cuno's measures generate sympathy abroad, they're not enough to pressure France to desist, and the occupation continues. Now the German government has to support the millions of strikers by paying their salaries, for which they need, yep, you guessed it, more currency. So the printing presses keep rolling and rolling.
Did you see that stack of money?
And rolling. As if there isn't enough trouble, faced with the impossibility of making money the usual way, business owners now start speculating against the hyperinflation, stockpiling goods to sell them above market value ahead of every deflation of the mark. This diverts even more real value from the economy and adds to the exploding price levels. By November 1923, you need 44.2 billion marks to buy $1. Now, this might seem comical, but there's nothing funny about this at all. For the average German, it means that all their life savings are completely useless. They cannot pay rent, utilities, they can't pay clothes, they can't even buy a loaf of bread. To give you an example, here's a story from Ian Kershaw's book, To Hell and Back. In January 1923, a man living in Berlin retires with a very decent yearly pension of 100,000 marks. Before the war, this would have meant a comfortable retirement. But in 1923, this only gets him a one-day ticket on the subway. So the man buys his subway ticket and goes home, where he locks himself in his closet to starve to death. The everyday economy reverts to a dark economy trading of goods, taking yet more value out of the fiscal system. Cuno's measures against the French take on a life of their own and escalate into active resistance and violent sabotage. The extremists on both ends of the spectrum actually cooperate as reactionary ex-Freikorps members join with communist activists to carry out sabotage actions. By August, there's increasing fears of another revolution from either the right or the left, or perhaps even both. Cuno and his government are forced to resign. President Friedrich Ebert calls for a grand coalition of liberals and conservatives under the conservative Gustav Stresemann as chancellor. Stresemann discourages the passive resistance, and he calls off Cuno's strike measures. He puts Germany in a state of emergency so that he can use military support to stop unrest. Most importantly, though, he starts planning for a currency reform to stop hyperinflation. His idea is that if he can find a way to meet reparations but show how crippling they are to Germany, this will eventually lead the Allies to back down, right? Stresemann will actually succeed in time, but for now, the country is spiraling the drain, with renewed revolutionary spirit threatening his attempt to curb the crisis. A great challenge will now come both from the state government and the extremists in the southern state of Bavaria and its capital, Munich. There, the National Socialist Workers' Party, the NSDAP, increasingly known simply as the Nazis, has undergone a transformation as Adolf Hitler continues to solidify his position. Together with his new mentor, Dietrich Eckart, and an influx of prominent and wealthy supporters like the World War I flying ace Hermann Goering, Hitler has ousted...
People are still wealthy in Germany. Wealthy in what terms? Because the currency has gone tank. So, wealthy in what meaning? Interesting. Very interesting that there's still wealthy people.
Party founder Anton Drexler. He is now the uncontested leader of a party that is steadily growing into a personal cult around this charismatic, angry orator with a toothbrush mustache. He refers to himself as Der Führer, the leader. And since 1919, membership has grown from just 60 to 55,787 members. Despite the nation's ban on paramilitary units, Ernst Röhm has gathered hundreds of the most violent party members in the uniformed Sturmabteilung, or SA. Hitler's speeches attract ever larger crowds, and he continues to hammer home the need to abrogate the Versailles Treaty and solve the Jewish problem. Part of his arguments are based on the stab-in-the-back myth that claims that the German army was still undefeated in the field in November 1918, and the armistice was just a betrayal by the November criminals, a supposed cabal of civilian politicians who just wanted to overthrow the imperial monarchy.
You know, there's that saying, if if you tell a lie and you say it repeatedly, over and over and over again, it becomes the truth. And I think this is what Hitler was doing, telling all these lies, making sure that people can believe in those lies, and, he wins their support that way. Repeating the same lies at the same speeches and rallies that he's holding, the same lies, they just become truth to the people, and that's how he's winning.
Now, even at that time, there is no dispute among military scholars that Germany lost the war in the field. But this was not a popular thing to say in Germany, especially if you were one of the men responsible for the war effort. The myth, already there in 1918, picks up speed in late 1919 when former Field Marshal and Chief of Staff of the German Army, Paul von Hindenburg, testifies in front of the Parliamentary Commission tasked with finding the causes of the World War and Germany's defeat. He says, "As an English general has very truly said, the German army was stabbed in the back." His statement gets wide coverage in the press, and it being Hindenburg, it's taken at face value and left unquestioned. The myth is fortified by other politicians, even ones like Ebert, that are supposedly part of the November criminals, and it soon becomes mainstream belief. The general that Hindenburg was speaking of is Sir Neil Malcolm, who in turn had it from a dinner with Ludendorff, who in turn had been trying to convince Hindenburg of the validity of this myth. It soon becomes part of the anti-Semitic narrative of people like the Nazi publisher Alfred Rosenberg, and Ludendorff proposes that the force behind the November criminals is a Jewish, Marxist, socialist conspiracy against the German race. Now, Ludendorff, if you remember, had not only been a virtual military dictator by the end of the war, he had also been part of the failed Ludwigskap putsch to overthrow the government in 1921.
Okay, but then I don't think I've ever understood this part, the hate that the German politicians and many people in Germany during that time have for Jewish people. Like, what's going on with that? What's going on with that? Why did they hate them so much, and they would actually use them as a scapegoat for their own defeats during World War I? Why put so much hate on them as the Jewish community in Germany? I don't understand how is it that those two connect, the World War I with Jewish people. I don't know how does that connect, but yeah, it's just strange, really. How do you just blame it on a religion or a cultural group of people? That it's their fault that we lost World War I. It's their fault that we were betrayed. It's their fault that our economy is going down, or our people are not pure. It's weird.
After that failed, he had fled to Munich, which had become a hotbed of right-wing extremism. In May of this year, 1923, Ludendorff has met a new comrade in arms, Adolf Hitler. And this pair are now ready to launch another attempt at taking power by force. But first, they must take Bavaria.
But Ludendorff's head, man. I mean, what is that pointy thing? I think this is what the Germans, during the times of their monarchy, the generals and the military officers, I think they wore those hats. But man, are they so funny, really. They're just so weird.
But Bavaria has other plans. The conservative Bavarian government is extremely unhappy about Stresemann's cessation of resistance in the Ruhr. To them, it was a missed opportunity to reinvigorate German national pride and possibly even defeat the reparations agreement. So Bavaria needs to take control of the situation. On September 26th,
Bavaria was its own standalone country. It wasn't connected to the German Reich or the German government. But then now in the present, Bavaria is like a state or a province of Germany, and it's not like its own separate country. I don't know if it was its own separate country during this time, during 1923, but yeah, I'm assuming it was. I could be wrong. In the comment section, you guys can correct me.
Bavarian Prime Minister Eugen von Knilling uses his constitutional powers in case of national crisis and appoints former governor of Bavaria, Gustav von Kahr, as State Commissioner of Bavaria with wide-ranging powers, effectively making him the dictator of Bavaria. Von Kahr promptly declares a state of emergency and starts an open conspiracy with Police Commissioner Colonel Hans von Zeisser and General Otto von Lossow, Chief of Staff of the Reichswehr, the German military in Bavaria. The plan is to bring about Bavarian independence and then use Bavaria's position as a rich and populous state to force the government in Berlin to transfer significant power to Munich. But these events confound Hitler's and Ludendorff's plans. Originally, the Nazis had planned to start a coup September 29th, but when von Kahr is made Bavarian dictator 3 days earlier, they decide to wait and see what he will do. In fact, the new autocrats in Bavaria are not completely unsympathetic to the Nazis and actually hope to win them over. Berlin, however, issues a ban on the Nazi newspaper Völkische Beobachter on October 18th and orders von Lossow to enforce it. But von Lossow refuses and is promptly dismissed as chief of staff. He reacts by having the Bavarian Reichswehr swear loyalty to the Bavarian government rather than the national one. Bavaria, in effect, has seceded from the Union, but von Kahr doesn't really know how to proceed. Meanwhile, Hitler's growing impatient. In his opinion, all they have to do is follow Mussolini's example, march on Berlin and take power, with him as Führer, of course. On October 30th, the frustrated Hitler is speaking at another packed rally at one of Munich's main event venues, Circus Krone. He calls for prompt action and national revolt. Now, immediately, this very evening. Well, he's cheered for initiative, but nothing happens. Hitler and Ludendorff devise a new plan. On November 8th, von Kahr, von Zeisser, von Lossow, von Knilling, and several cabinet members have called a meeting with 3,000 Bavarian nationalists in the Brauhauskeller beer hall. The goal of the meeting is to explain von Kahr's plans and rally support for action against Berlin. In the middle of von Kahr's opening speech, approximately 600 SA men surround the hall, while Hitler, Goering, Rudolf Hess, and 20 supporters storm the hall. Unable to make himself heard, Hitler jumps up on a chair and fires his pistol into the air and exclaims, "The national revolution has broken out." He declares the Bavarian government deposed and announces a new government with himself and Ludendorff as leaders. While Goering addresses the crowd, Hitler takes von Kahr, von Zeisser, and von Lossow into an adjacent room and demands that they join his government and revolution.
This is a movie. Just imagine you're holding a separatist government meeting in a beer hall, and then all of a sudden, people just come inside the beer hall and just declare that, hey, this is over, this party is over, this independence movement of Bavaria is over. You're all joining me now, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can say. Just like that. Wow. It's a movie, guys.
Von Zeisser and von Lossow accept, but von Kahr hesitates. Hitler storms back into the beer hall and explains that their actions are against the Berlin Jew government and the November criminals of 1918. He orates for a long time, ending with, "Outside are Kahr, Lossow, and Zeisser. They are struggling hard to reach a decision. May I say to them that you will stand behind them." The crowd roars in approval, and by the time Ludendorff arrives at the scene, von Kahr seems to be on board. Röhm and the SA are out taking control of key military and government buildings in Munich. Hess and 30 SA arrest von Knilling and the other cabinet members. Hitler and Ludendorff remain at the beer hall, and von Kahr, von Zeisser, and von Lossow leave to do their part, which turns out to be not what Hitler and Ludendorff have planned. What they don't know is that von Knilling's deputy Franz Matt has taken the remaining cabinet members and left for the northeastern Bavarian city of Regensburg with the intent to govern from there. As Matt leaves, he calls for the people to resist the Prussian Ludendorff and gives the police orders to shoot at any putschists that take violent action. Now, before I go any further, I have to tell you, I'm not joking. If there is one thing that many Bavarians cannot stand, it's being told what to do by a Prussian, even to this day in 2018. Matt's calling Ludendorff out for being Prussian is actually credited by many historians as a crucial turning point of events. During the night, the call to resist the Prussian Ludendorff spreads like wildfire, especially among the police, who set up roadblocks and target pockets of SA to arrest them. Sometime after midnight, von Kahr, von Zeisser, and von Lossow find out what Matt has accomplished. Now von Lossow makes his way to the Munich army barracks, and at 2:55 a.m., he radios a message asking loyal Union forces for help. And to all of the Reichswehr in Germany, he says, the three are not part of the coup, have only pretended to join the Nazis under gunpoint, that they repudiate the putschists, and that von Kahr has outlawed the NSDAP and its sister organizations. Technically, the putsch is already over, but Hitler, Ludendorff, Goering, and Röhm have not yet given up. Röhm and 400 SA men are holed up in the cavalry school in central Munich, under siege from a force of hundreds of soldiers and police. They will exchange periodic fire and hold out until around 11 a.m.
All of this is occurring in a matter of like 1 or 2 days. This entire merry-go-round, this entire situation. And while this is all going on in Berlin, I don't think they know what's going on down there in Munich. They don't know what's going on with this separatist province or state. This is crazy.
In defiance of a clear defeat, Hitler and Ludendorff leave the Brauhaus Keller in the morning and go to Odeonsplatz, where they have previously announced a rally. Their path is blocked by 130 heavily armed police officers. Shots are fired. Hitler and Ludendorff are in the front line. Hitler has linked arms with a fellow Nazi functionary, and as they head toward the police blockade, his comrade is shot dead and pulls Hitler with him to the ground. Hitler's armed bodyguard throws himself in front of the Führer, taking 11 bullets to the chest, dying instantly. Goering is hit in the leg and the buttock, while Ludendorff is unscathed but arrested on the scene.
Wow. I mean, really. I said this before, it's a movie. It's even more of a movie now. It's even more of a movie right now. I think we do need a TV show or a movie that's based on the rise of Hitler. We need to see these things as well, you know. I know there'll be some people who feel, you know, kind of uneasy about this thing, but we need to see these things. We need to understand how these people rose to power, you know, so that it can be part of our history that we went through something like this. We've had leaders like this. We've had people who would jump in for their leaders' protection and take 11 bullets for them and die while the leader just continues moving forward. We need stuff like this, you know. We need the good, the bad, and the ugly. Man, the way Indian Idol is explaining all of this, really, it sounds like a movie that I've just watched or something. Ugh.
Hitler flees, and by 1 p.m. the putsch is completely crushed. Ludendorff is let go after a few hours of interrogation based on his word of honor that he won't leave Bavaria until trial, and Hitler is arrested 2 days later. The final battle leaves 16 Nazis, 4 policemen, and 1 bystander dead, and many more wounded. Hitler, Ludendorff, and their gang will now face trial for treason, but they will receive mild sentences.
Treason under what law? Under what jurisdiction? The German government or the Bavarian government, the new imposed self, you know, independent state? Under which law are they going to be judged under? And yeah, it's quite interesting how these guys all gambled and they lost. They lost big time. And yet still, after all of this, somehow Adolf Hitler still becomes the dictator of Germany. So it's interesting, really. It's just so interesting.
Ludendorff won't even spend a single day in prison, and Hitler, although sentenced to 5 years, will only spend 9 months in a minimum security facility in more or less free association with his co-conspirators. He will use the time to write Mein Kampf together with Rudolf Hess. A little more than a year after the coup, he will emerge from prison more famous and more powerful than ever. The Nazis will...
You know, sorry about this, but you know, this also tends to happen in South African politics. You know, some politicians who are either, you know, being you know, they're going to court for corruption, right? Or some that have gone to jail. When they come back from jail or when they come back from their court battles, they become even more famous with our local people. And I just don't understand, how is that possible? Why is it that this person who is charged with corruption, you know, who has stolen public funds for their own self-enrichment, who have done nepotism by employing their own family members into government departments is all of a sudden even more famous, now than he or she ever was before they got arrested or before they went to court to face their criminal actions. I just don't understand, how is that possible? Why do people love criminals, that much? But I think in terms of, in Germany's case, in terms of Adolf Hitler, he, probably people saw him as someone who was fighting for Germany as a whole, and, they loved him for that he was fighting for everybody who believed in this German ideal. And they probably saw him as a hero because of that, And also, just like in my own country, in South Africa, how Nelson Mandela, he was also fighting for his people. He was fighting for freedom. There were people who did see him as a terrorist. There were some people who saw him as a criminal. And then there was the majority of South Africans who saw him as a freedom fighter. And when he went to jail and he came out of jail after 27 years of incarceration, he became even more famous than he was when he was sentenced to jail to Robben Island. So yes, definitely, it's quite interesting how leaders of these political parties and organizations are able to attain so much interest from the people, because they perceive that these guys are fighting for them. It's quite interesting. What I just don't understand is those who become more famous after they've been charged with corruption. I don't get that part. But anyways.
Weave a complex, heroic myth around the putsch and use it for their propaganda. The Bavarian government does not rise up against Berlin, and in February 1924, von Kahr steps down as dictator. Although the coup has not resulted in a Nazi government, the putsch has further weakened the Weimar Republic. What looks like a failure in 1923 will turn out to be Hitler's first great success. But what of Stresemann and hyperinflation? Well, partly due to the putsch, the coalition in Berlin falls apart when the liberals leave in protest over not enough being done to rein in the extremists. The conservatives form yet another short-lived government, and Stresemann becomes foreign minister. His plan to create a new currency locked to Germany's resources measured in gold, the Rentenmark, is successfully instituted, and by early 1924, the crisis is over. He will negotiate a reduced reparations plan, and Germany is on the path to a few years of economic boom and relative societal stability before the next crisis hits in 1929. In the 6 years until then, the NSDAP, now banned, will be recreated. The SA, and eventually Hitler's personal guard, the SS, will start to systematically harass political opponents in the streets, beating and murdering their way to power, modeled on Mussolini and the fascists in Italy. This policy of political violence will only escalate after they take power in 1933. In 1934, von Kahr will be one of the victims. On his way to internment at Dachau concentration camp, he will be torn from the prison transport and beaten to death by a mob of 100 SS men. To get our episodes ahead of time and support the effort to make more content like this, join the Time Ghost Army on Patreon or directly at our timeghost.tv website. There, you can also sign up to our forum for free. Links are in the description. If you missed our episode about the German Revolution and Hitler's political beginnings, it's right here. And if you have not already, subscribe to Time Ghost and World War II on YouTube. World War II week by week starts September 1st, 2018. Ein Prosit, der Gemütlichkeit. Oh ja.
Yes, guys, that was Hitler's beer hall disaster between two wars, 1923, part 1 of 1. Really, this disaster, this beer hall disaster was like a movie, really. How Hitler and his associates would just barge into a dictator's self-proclaimed independent state of Bavaria organization hall meeting that they have, and just declare that, you know, Bavaria is now under the Nazi party's leadership, and your dictator will be under our banner as well, and we're going to be continuing to conquer the rest of Germany. Just imagine, just like that, you just come by with your associates, and then you pull the dictator and his associates into a separate room and not negotiate with them, but demand their allegiance, demand them to bend the knee to you and to your organization. And that fails, you know, and then you go trying to escape Munich. You head into the police, and the police start shooting at you, and then you have some of your supporters who are coming right beside you or behind you or even in front of you, you know, marching with you towards the police, and then some of them take bullets for you. Like, guys, this is a movie. It's a movie. But yeah, I find this very, very interesting, how Hitler was really trying his best to overtake either the national government of Germany or the Bavarian government, the self-proclaimed dictatorship there, and with their independent movement as an independent state, you know, trying to take over that little piece of land of Bavaria there. You know, it's just interesting how he tried to make this work in his own way. You know, also taking samples or taking some ideas from Mussolini and how to create his organization, how to make it better, if I can say that. So yeah, it's very, very interesting, guys. Yeah. If you like the video, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos. And I guess I'll see you next week. Okay? Bye-bye.